not walnut. I think it is oak. Still worth pulling out, because I very rarely have oak in the shop, but it's still really big, and I've got it kind of both sides. I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to get it out of here. Also, I'm not sure it's more rotten than I thought. Before I cut those out, I've got some black locust over here that I know is black locust, and I want to cut that out because it's really, really good for posts. Because it takes like a literal 100 years to rot, and it's free because they're dead just laying here. It's probably fine for something. I'll have to cut it shorter, most likely, but the rest of it is very, very solid. Stuff's stupid hard. I gotta figure out how to carry this stuff out. And I gotta pull that one down. Right up there, it's clear. I can get the tractor up there, bunch of chains, bunch of straps, out in the open. We can get it pulled out. Big oak log is right there. The tractor's right here. I'm gonna back it in as far as I can into the woods, and then we're gonna hook up a chain and a strap, or maybe just 2 straps. Probably don't need the chain because it's not gonna move anyway, so it's all hopeless. That worked. This is all solid. That's all gone. This could just be because it was lower down, so it might just be this end, but half of it, at least, is still good wood. Obviously, this doesn't require a tractor. Just makes it easier, because now I can pick this up with the forks and carry it away. But you can pull it out of the woods with any kind of vehicle. And if it's smaller, you can pick it up and put it in a truck bed. And then you just need a chainsaw mill or a bandsaw mill, and you have free lumber. It's gonna be a little bit trickier. The tree's way over there. It looks a lot further than it actually is, but it's still like 100 feet. So before the trolls go on their keyboards and type away and tell me what an idiot I am, so, you know, privilege, because I have woods I can go into and say I'm a terrible person because I'm saying people can get free lumber when they actually can't, because not everybody has woods they can go into to get a big giant log, and not everybody has a tractor that they can pull it out with and carry it over to their nice big concrete pads and build it out. That is true, but you do not need all those things to do a very, very similar thing to this. And this is obviously not a very pretty log. It may not have been worth doing this at all, but that doesn't mean it's not worth it ever. I've pulled out a lot of really good lumber from woods. A lot of it was falling down, and if it's an oak log like this, oak takes like 25 years to start rotting a lot of the time, unless it's on the ground, of course. That'll make it go a little bit faster sometimes, especially with bark on it. If it's bark on it, it'll take long, it'll be slower. But if you have a friend who has woods, or if you know somebody, if you have a neighbor, if there's a farm near you that has woods, they would probably not mind at all if you went over there and picked up some old logs from their woods. Of course, ask them first. Don't just go do anything. That's like wood poaching. I don't want to advocate that. If the bark is missing but the log is still solid, yeah, there's basically 4 options for what kind of wood it is. If it's not cedar, which is cedar's a pretty obvious one, there's basically 4 deciduous trees that it's going to be, and cedar doesn't really have bark, so they just looked at it different. If it looks like a deciduous tree, there's basically 4 options if you're on the eastern half of the United States. Either black locust, black cherry, black walnut, or some kind of oak. Oak's the least likely because it does rot fairly fast compared to the other ones. Cedar is a totally different breed, different thing. Black locust will last like 80 to 100 years in ground contact. Cherry's probably around like 30 or 40 years. It could last. It'll start rotting, decaying, and all that stuff. Black walnut will last at least 25, 30 years in ground contact. So those are really good woods to pull out of the woods. Maybe it's not good for cabinetry and stuff like that, but I have used wood like that for boxes and lids and things like that are nicer things that really matter. And just because a log looks rotten in the woods, if you stab into it with a stick or a knife or something and it feels hard, it probably is. That black locust is insanely hard wood, especially when it's old and rotten, because the middle part's dried out. It's insane. To get to figure out how to mill this, I will probably film milling it into logs or boards. This is nothing new. None of this stuff's new. Pulling logs from the woods, people have been doing it for thousands of years, ever since we've been using wood, pretty much. People have been using downed logs, and it makes a lot of sense, but it only makes sense if you're looking for wood that doesn't rot very quickly, because most likely it didn't fall down yesterday. This is black locust, this is a cedar log. Obviously they look very different now because this one's older, but you can just look at the shape of it's very different. We're going to talk about identifying a little bit, so you know how to identify logs in the woods that are really good for most things. Cedar, obviously a slightly different look to it. The wood will be red on the inside when you cut into it, as it should be. For eastern red cedar at least. There's a lot more branches on it. I mean, all these were branches. So just any kind of evergreen like that. A lot more branchy than the black locust trees. The black locusts are not going to have branches pretty much for the first like 20 or 30 feet generally, depending on the size. If the cedar tree, they don't really have bark. They just kind of have these like flakes on the outside of them. A black locust tree has very distinct bark. Can't really find a good piece of it, but that's a pretty good example of the bark right there. It's kind of like oak, but it's a little bit different. It's a more weaving of a pattern to it. It's very deep, the cuts in it. It's kind of a brown color, more brown than most other trees. Oak trees and gum trees, stuff like that, they usually get a little more gray. Maple trees and everything like that. These ones don't. They're very green on the inside. That's another way to tell. Sometimes it's brown when it dries out more, but when it's green, when it's fresh, it's very, very green. 100 years, literally, or more in ground contact, which is absolutely insane to me. I didn't know that until like 3 years ago when I started actually collecting it and using it, and I've used it a lot of places, and no signs of any kind of rot yet, which makes sense because it's only been like a couple years, but anyway. So obviously if I had a bandsaw mill, I could mill this stuff into lumber, and then I would have a lot of it, but I've heard it's very difficult to dry black locust, so I'm not sure I even want to get into that. Even if I had a bandsaw mill, I'd probably try it. If I wanted a lot more posts, this is 13 logs, I could split these. I've done that several times, and then you have multiples, most likely 4 posts per piece, and these are 10 feet long. So if you're making a 3-foot fence, you can cut them in half and get 8 posts per log, which would be, what is that, if I split them all into 4, which is crazy that you could get that many out of this mini. Very, 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 very efficient. Labor is the only expense for these ones because they're just in the woods. I would give you some more tips on how to identify them, but it's not summer, so I can't show you any leaves, which is the easiest way to identify because they have these very long compound leaves, and the leaflets are very small, round leaves that are very easy to identify when they are there, but they're not there right now. So this is how to identify black locust trees in the winter. Look for green wood, look for deeply ribbed brown bark that weaves in and out quite a bit. Very skinny and tall trees with very few branches. Not a cedar tree. Cedar trees gonna have a lot more branches. Very, very good wood, very useful wood, and it cost me nothing but labor, which is pretty cool. So I will see you in the next one. That was really weird to do that sitting down.